The prize for passengers was supposed to be life-changing, seeing firsthand the most iconic shipwreck in history, the Titanic.
The Titanic lies silent at the bottom of the Atlantic, yet it still speaks through fragments of film, forgotten records, and preserved messages. What did these lost photos capture in those final hours? Let's explore the hidden pieces of a tragedy that history barely remembers. Through the lens of Father Brown, snapshots of life on the Titanic. Among the 2,224 passengers who would board the Titanic, only one man would capture its soul on film before tragedy struck. In the early hours of April 10, 1912, as the majestic RMS Titanic prepared for her maiden voyage from Southampton, England, a young priest with a camera would unknowingly become the chronicler of maritime history. Father Francis Brown, a 31-year-old Irish Jesuit priest and amateur photographer, stepped aboard the world's largest and most luxurious ocean liner. His uncle, the Bishop of Cloyne, had gifted him a ticket for the first leg of this historic journey. At 883 feet long and weighing 46,328 tons, the Titanic was a marvel of engineering and opulence, marketed as unsinkable and representing the pinnacle of human achievement. From April 10th to 11th, Father Brown meticulously documented life aboard this floating palace. His photographs captured diverse aspects of the ship's operations and daily life, from the loading of trunks and mailbags at port to the bustling promenade deck as the ship passed the Portuguese RMSP Tagus. His lens captured memorable scenes of commerce, like a woman selling Irish lace aboard the vessel, and intimate moments of leisure, such as young Doug Spedden, a child survivor of Titanic, playing on deck. The photographs also documented the ship's impressive amenities: the well-appointed gymnasium, the elegant first-class dining room, the refined reading and writing room, and Father Brown's own first-class stateroom. Of particular historical significance was his photograph of wireless operator Harold Bride at work in the Marconi room, one of the few images showing the ship's crucial communications center. The collection provides an intimate glimpse into all aspects of shipboard life, from the luxurious first-class areas to the more modest quarters of steerage passengers. During the voyage, a wealthy American couple offered Brown a first-class ticket to continue to New York. However, on April 11th, when he sought permission from his Jesuit superiors, he received a firm telegram ordering him to return to his duties in Dublin and disembark at Queenstown, Ireland. Following these orders, he left the Titanic at 1:30 p.m. on April 11th, as the ship anchored at Queenstown for its last port of call before embarking on its transatlantic crossing. This directive would unknowingly save not only his life, but also preserve his invaluable photographs, the only visual record that would survive the disaster, offering future generations their sole glimpse into life aboard the Titanic before tragedy struck. On April 14th, just 3 days after Father Brown's departure, the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic, claiming over 1,500 lives. His photographs, initially taken as simple travel memories, became the only surviving visual record of life aboard the doomed liner. 3 days after Father Brown's final photograph of Titanic's grandeur, a teenage girl would document what remained of that dream. The Unseen Lens, Bernice Palmer's Titanic journey. The Carpathia was a Cunard Line passenger steamship destined to become famous as Titanic's rescue vessel. Among its passengers stood a 17-year-old girl clutching her new Kodak Brownie box camera, a recent gift received for Christmas. Bernie Palmer, a young Canadian, would soon become an unlikely chronicler of maritime history's greatest tragedy. In April 1912, Bernie and her mother embarked on what was meant to be a leisurely Mediterranean cruise aboard the Carpathia. Their peaceful journey took a dramatic turn on April 14th at 12:20 a.m. when the ship's wireless operator received Titanic's desperate distress call, reporting she had struck an iceberg and was sinking rapidly. Captain Arthur Rostron immediately sprang into action, ordering the Carpathia to race toward Titanic's last known coordinates. Through the dark night, he skillfully navigated a treacherous field of icebergs, while his crew and passengers, roused from their slumber, prepared to receive survivors of the unfolding tragedy. As dawn broke, Bernie and her fellow passengers were greeted by a haunting sight. Massive icebergs loomed in the distance, their jagged peaks glistening in the early morning light. Through this eerie landscape, lifeboats began emerging from the mist, their occupants huddled together against the biting cold. With remarkable presence of mind, Bernie began documenting this historic rescue. Her photographs captured raw moments of survival that would become historic. In one striking image, Titanic survivors huddle on Carpathia's deck in mismatched borrowed clothing, their elegant first-class wardrobes lost to the Atlantic depths. Another frame freezes a powerful moment. Young honeymooners Mr. and Mrs. George, a harder of Brooklyn. Their faces a complex mix of relief and haunted expressions. In that same photograph stands Mrs. Charles M. Hayes, her back turned to Bernie's camera, unaware she's being captured in a moment between salvation and grief. While she and her two daughters survived, her husband, the president of the Grand Trunk Railway, went down with the ship. Through a teenager's simple brownie camera, these intimate moments of human survival and loss were preserved forever. While documenting humanity's survival aboard Carpathia, Palmer unknowingly photographed another piece of the tragic puzzle, what many believe was Titanic's killer. The fatal ice, the hunt for Titanic's iceberg. Multiple ships crossing these waters claim to have photographed the very berg that sealed Titanic's fate, launching a century-long debate over which image truly captured history's most infamous piece of ice. Among these photographs, Bernice Palmer's images again proved historic. Taken at daybreak from Carpathia's deck, her photographs show a massive iceberg bearing what appeared to be a telling clue, a distinctive streak of red paint presumably scraped from Titanic's hull during the collision. Palmer sold the rights to these historic images to Underwood & Underwood, a New York photography agency, for a mere $10, with the contract specifically describing them as the iceberg and icefield run into by the Titanic. But Palmer's weren't the only photographs claiming to show the deadly berg. Captain W.F. Wood of the Etonian had photographed an imposing iceberg on April 12th, just 2 days before the disaster. His documented position placed this berg almost exactly where Titanic would meet her doom 40 hours later, a chilling coincidence that would later make his photographs some of the most scrutinized evidence in maritime history. The crew of SS Burma captured their own photographs, as did Captain de Carteret of the Minia, whose images also showed a suspicious red streak along the ice. Perhaps most intriguing is the photograph taken aboard the steamer Prince Adelbert on the morning of April 15th. The ship's steward, who captured the image, noted visible red paint on the berg's surface. This photograph would later hang for decades in the offices of the law firm representing the White Star Line, Titanic's owners, eventually selling at auction for thousands of pounds. Ice researcher Steve Bruneau explains that during a collision, an iceberg's surface behaves like rock, making it entirely possible for the ship's paint to become embedded in the ice. Such paint could remain visible for days, as long as it stayed above water and temperatures remained cold. However, with nearly 400 icebergs recorded crossing the 48th parallel that April, and the constant southward drift of these frozen giants, definitively identifying Titanic's iceberg.
Yes, what do you see?
Iceberg, right ahead!
Thank you.
Remains one of maritime history's most enduring mysteries. The icebergs that haunted those waters in 1912 have long since melted away, but 2.5 miles below, tangible pieces of that fateful night remained. Raising the Giant, the story of Titanic's Big Piece. In the dark depths where Titanic rests, one artifact stood out among the countless others, a massive section of the ship's starboard hull that would become known simply as the Big Piece. Weighing an extraordinary 15 tons and spanning multiple decks, this fragment of Titanic's outer shell would become the largest piece ever recovered from the wreck, though bringing it to the surface proved to be an epic tale of determination and engineering. First spotted in 1994, the recovery team led by George Tulloch and Paul-Henri Nargeolet saw in this enormous hull section a chance to let future generations touch a literal piece of Titanic's history.
It is the largest piece of the Titanic that will, in all likelihood, ever be recovered.
Their first attempt in 1996 became a dramatic spectacle as cruise ships gathered to watch the planned raising. The submersible Nautil attached flotation bags to the hull section, and for 2 hours, observers waited in anticipation. But fate had other plans. When the Canadian ship MV Jim Killebuck proved unable to winch the massive piece aboard, and Hurricane Edward swept through, the hull section slipped back into the abyss. Undeterred, the team returned in 1998.
When released from its ballast, the lift bag floats back to the surface, bringing along whatever it is attached to.
With the vessel a bale supporter, This time, Success, the massive hull section, then weighing about 20 tons with marine growth and water,
faced its greatest challenge in efforts to recover a 20-ton section of Titanic's hull.
finally broke the surface after 86 years in darkness. But raising the piece was just the beginning of its journey. In Boston, conservators faced a difficult decision, ultimately splitting it into two sections for practical transportation and exhibition. The main section underwent an intensive conservation process, desalination using sacrificial anodes, an 18-month sodium carbonate bath, and careful cleaning with high-pressure water jets. Remarkably, some of the hull's bronze fixtures remained functional, and traces of the original paint still clung to its surface. Today, this magnificent piece of maritime history rests in the Titanic, the artifact exhibition at Luxor, Las Vegas, where it has captivated over 22 million visitors. Its smaller section, known as the Little Piece, found a home in Orlando, Florida. These fragments of Titanic's hull serve as tangible connections to that fateful night, allowing visitors to stand before actual pieces of the legendary ship that had lain silent on the ocean floor for nearly a century. While modern technology helped raise the Big Piece from the depths, it was an earlier innovation that had tried to save the Titanic that fateful night. Marones Vision and the unsung saviors. In the early years of the 20th century, a young Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi revolutionized maritime communication with his wireless telegraphy system. By 1912, his technology had become essential for passenger ships, and Titanic was equipped with the most advanced wireless system of its time. For the White Star Line's premier vessel, only the finest would do, both in technology and personnel, but the system was only as good as the men who operated it. And in this case, those men would face challenges no one could have predicted. In the heart of the Titanic's wireless room, two young men, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, stood at the helm of this cutting-edge technology. Phillips, the senior wireless operator, and Bride, his junior assistant.
Its two operators, John George Phillips and his junior, Harold Sidney Bride, worked a shift system.
Were employed by the Marconi Company to maintain and operate the Titanic's state-of-the-art wireless equipment. The ship's main transmitter, a 5-kilowatt rotary spark generator, was capable of sending messages over distances of up to 1,000 miles, a remarkable feat for the early 20th century. However, just 4 days into the Titanic's maiden voyage, disaster struck. The ship's wireless equipment, the lifeline that connected the vessel to the outside world, suddenly broke down. At the time, strict protocols dictated that only licensed Marconi technicians were authorized to repair the equipment, and operators were forbidden from attempting any fixes themselves. Faced with a growing backlog of passenger messages and the looming threat of being cut off from communication entirely, Phillips and Bride made a fateful decision. Risking their jobs and reputations, they set to work repairing the damaged equipment, toiling for hours to restore the vital link between the Titanic and the rest of the world. Their efforts paid off, and the wireless room was soon buzzing with activity once more. Phillips and Bride worked tirelessly, often forgoing sleep and meals, to send and receive messages from passengers, other ships, and shore stations. Their dedication would soon be put to the ultimate test. On the night of April 14th, as the Titanic steamed through the icy waters of the North Atlantic, Phillips and Bride received a series of increasingly urgent ice warnings from nearby ships. However, with the wireless room overwhelmed by passenger messages and the operators struggling to keep up with the demand, many of these critical warnings went unheeded. When the Titanic struck an iceberg at 11:40 p.m., Phillips and Bride immediately sprang into action. "Come at once. We have struck a berg. It's a CQD, old man." Phillips urgently tapped out to the Carpathia. They began sending out distress signals, first using the traditional Come Quick Danger CQD code, and later switching to the newer Save Our Souls SOS signal, in a desperate attempt to attract the attention of nearby ships. As the gravity of the situation became clear, their messages grew more dire. "We have struck an iceberg and sinking by the head," they signaled to the Frankfurt. The responses from other ships revealed their initial disbelief, but as the reality set in, they quickly began relaying the distress signals, hoping to attract any vessel close enough to help. For the next several hours, as the Titanic slowly sank into the frigid depths, Phillips and Bride remained steadfast at their posts. Their messages became increasingly desperate. "We are putting passengers off in small boats. Women and children in boats cannot last much longer, losing power." As water continued to flood the ship, they sent out one of their final transmissions. "Come quick, engine room nearly full." Their tireless efforts, maintaining their composure in the face of unimaginable adversity, helped coordinate the rescue of 706 passengers and crew members by the Carpathia. Tragically, Jack Phillips did not survive the sinking. He remained at his post until the very end, sending out distress signals even as the ship's lights flickered and the water rose around him. His bravery and sacrifice, along with that of his colleague Harold Bride, exemplified the heights of human resilience and the unbreakable bonds of duty and honor. The wireless operator's heroism during Titanic's final hours was legendary. But their story began days earlier with a series of warnings that would haunt maritime history. Missed warnings, the icebergs that were ignored. In the days leading up to the Titanic's fateful collision with an iceberg, the ship's wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, received a series of increasingly urgent ice warnings from nearby vessels. These messages, had they been heeded, might have altered the course of history and prevented one of the greatest maritime disasters of all time. The first ice warning came on April 12th, 2 days before the collision, when the Titanic received a message from the Coronia, another passenger liner traversing the North Atlantic. The message read, "Bergs, growlers and field ice in latitude 42 degrees north to 49 degrees north, longitude 49 degrees west to 51 degrees west." This warning, which placed the ice field directly in the Titanic's path, was acknowledged by the ship's crew but not acted upon. Over the next several days, the Titanic received a series of similar warnings from other ships, including the Baltic, the America, and the Californian. These messages, sent via wireless telegraphy, painted an increasingly alarming picture of the ice conditions in the North Atlantic and the potential danger they posed to the Titanic and her passengers.
I can't, not on my own.
Georgiana.
Please, too high. No, I can't, please. Please.
However, due to a combination of factors, including the lack of a clear emergency communication channel, the prioritization of passenger messages over safety warnings, and the overconfidence of the ship's crew in the Titanic's supposed invincibility, many of these warnings were either missed or ignored. On the night of April 14th, just hours before the collision, the Titanic received a particularly dire warning from the Mesaba, a steamship that had recently encountered a large field of icebergs. The message, sent at 7:30 p.m., read, "Latitude 42 degrees north to 41 degrees 25 minutes north, longitude 49 degrees west to 50 degrees 30 minutes west, saw much heavy pack ice and great number large icebergs, also field ice." This message, which placed the ice field directly in the Titanic's path and warned of the presence of numerous large icebergs, was never delivered to the ship's bridge. Instead, it was left in the wireless room, where it was discovered by Bride only after the collision had occurred. While wireless warnings went unheeded below deck, an even simpler oversight would seal the Titanic's fate. When lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee finally spotted the iceberg, they were fighting an impossible battle, one that began with a missing key. The missing binoculars and the ship that couldn't see. In the inky blackness of the Atlantic, the Titanic's lookouts strained their naked eyes against the darkness, desperately seeking any hint of danger in their path. On this moonless night, with a calm sea and little wind, they stood at their post, unaware that their task was about to become part of history's greatest maritime tragedy. A critical detail in Titanic's tale centers on Second Officer David Blair, who was originally scheduled to serve on the ship's maiden voyage. However, when the White Star Line decided to appoint Henry Wilde as chief officer, this caused a reshuffling of officers. William Murdoch was demoted from chief to first officer, Charles Lightler from first to second officer, and David Blair was removed from the crew entirely. In his hurried departure, Blair accidentally took with him a small but crucial item, the key to the crow's nest locker containing the lookout's binoculars. The brass key, about 4 inches long, would later become a poignant symbol of the disaster. Blair kept it as a personal memento, unaware of its significance until much later. In 2007, the key was sold at auction for £90,000. The key was attached to a brass tag with the inscription, "Crow's Nest Telephone Titanic." These weren't mere nautical accessories. The binoculars, with their powerful lenses and wide field of view, were essential tools for spotting hazards at sea. Without them, the lookouts were left virtually blind against the ocean's dangers. Like soldiers sent to battle without weapons, they faced the treacherous iceberg-strewn waters with severely diminished defenses.
The collision takes place, opening its side to the iceberg so it can cut into it like a tin of sardines.
The cruel hand of fate wasn't finished weaving its tragic tapestry. On that fateful night, the SS Californian found itself mere miles from the Titanic. Through their binoculars, the Californian's crew spotted the Titanic's distress rockets piercing the night sky. What followed was a cascade of fatal misjudgments that would haunt maritime history forever. As ice fields surrounded both ships, a complex drama began to unfold. At 10:30 p.m., the Californian's wireless operator, Cyril Evans, had warned the Titanic about the dangerous ice ahead. The Titanic's wireless operator, Jack Phillips, busy with passenger messages, had brusquely replied, shut up, I am busy, I am working Cape Race." Shortly after, Evans, following the standard practice of the time, powered down his wireless for the night, just hours before Titanic would begin its desperate calls for help. Throughout the night, the tragedy deepened with each passing hour. Captain Stanley Lord of the Californian, having halted his ship amid the ice field, received multiple reports from his crew about mysterious lights and rockets in the distance. Despite the unusual nature of these sightings, Lord remained remarkably passive. When Second Officer Herbert Stone reported white rockets against the dark sky, Lord suggested they might be company signals or celebrations from another vessel. The Californian's third officer, Charles Groves, also witnessed the unusual rockets and reported a large passenger ship nearby. Lord's response was minimal. He merely instructed them to attempt Morse lamp communication, a futile effort given the distance and conditions. Even as 8 white rockets, the universal maritime distress signal, illuminated the night sky, Lord remained in his cabin, convinced that no emergency could warrant rousing his sleeping ship into action through the dangerous ice-strewn waters. When morning finally came, the Californian's crew reactivated their wireless to receive the devastating news. The great Titanic, just a few miles distant, had slipped beneath the waves hours earlier. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. Old camera found in the deep ocean revealed horrifying Titanic photos. During a deep-sea dive into the Titanic wreck, divers reportedly discovered an old camera tucked inside a watertight box. Remarkably, its reel negative remained intact. When the film was developed, it revealed an eerie image of a woman appearing to drown. Skeptics argue that it's impossible for a camera and film to survive at 12,000 feet underwater for over a century. What do you think? Is this a genuine artifact or an elaborate hoax? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Titanic's lost treasures, artifacts that speak from the abyss. Every reported find from Titanic's resting place adds to her ongoing story, but her true legacy lies in the treasure trove below. Nestled on the ocean floor, some 12,500 feet beneath the surface of the North Atlantic, lies a treasure trove of artifacts that tell the story of the Titanic's ill-fated voyage. From the personal belongings of passengers and crew to the ship's own equipment and fittings, these objects provide a poignant and tangible connection to the people and events of that tragic night. Since the wreck's discovery in 1985, numerous expeditions have been mounted to explore and document the Titanic's final resting place. Using advanced underwater technology, including remotely operated vehicles ROVs and manned submersibles, researchers have been able to recover a wide array of artifacts from the debris field surrounding the ship. Among the most evocative and emotionally charged of these artifacts are the personal belongings of the Titanic's passengers and crew. From jewelry and watches to clothing and toiletries, these items offer a glimpse into the lives and personalities of those who boarded the ship with such high hopes and met such a tragic end. Among the ocean's treasures, a small leather-bound Bible emerged from the wreckage, its pages whispering stories of Reverend Robert Bateman, a second-class passenger who perished in the sinking. The book, its text still clear despite decades beneath the waves, speaks of profound faith and the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The ship's recovered china and silverware tell their own haunting tales. Each delicate plate and ornate utensil, bearing the White Star Line emblem, captures the essence of a gilded age. These fragments of luxury paint vivid portraits of the grand floating palace and the privileged world of its first-class passengers, now forever frozen in time beneath the Atlantic. In recent years, new technologies and advanced exploration techniques have allowed researchers to uncover even more treasures from the Titanic's wreck site. In 2010, a team of scientists using high-resolution 3D imaging equipment discovered a host of previously unseen artifacts, including a leather suitcase, a marble sink from a first-class cabin, and a silver serving tray. These newly discovered artifacts, along with the countless others that have been recovered over the years, help to piece together a more comprehensive and nuanced understanding of the Titanic's legacy. They offer a tangible connection to the people and stories that have become so deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness and serve as a powerful reminder of the fragility of human life in the face of nature's awesome power. As salvaged artifacts help preserve Titanic's human story, cutting-edge technology now preserves something equally precious: the ship's final chapter. Mapping the tragedy. New technologies reveal Titanic's secrets. In the depths of the North Atlantic, some 370 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, the RMS Titanic rests in a watery grave, her once magnificent decks and staterooms now a haunting underwater museum. For decades, the precise details of the ship's sinking and the full extent of the wreckage remained largely unknown, the secrets of her final moments hidden beneath layers of silt and debris. However, recent advancements in deep-sea exploration and mapping technologies have allowed researchers to create stunningly detailed 3D reconstructions of the Titanic wreckage, offering unprecedented insights into the ship's final resting place and the events that unfolded during its tragic demise. One of the most significant breakthroughs in this regard has been the development of high-resolution sonar imaging and underwater laser scanning equipment. These cutting-edge tools, deployed by ROVs and manned submersibles, have enabled scientists to create incredibly accurate and detailed maps of the Titanic's wreck site, revealing previously unseen features and artifacts.
To conduct an archaeological study inside of the wreck. He reveals and documents spaces in the Titanic.
In 2010, a team of researchers from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and RMS Titanic conducted a comprehensive survey of the wreckage using state-of-the-art sonar and 3D imaging technology. The resulting images, compiled from over 130,000 high-resolution photos and sonar scans, offer a breathtaking view of the ship's remains, from the iconic bow section to the scattered debris field spanning over 15 square miles of the ocean floor. These 3D reconstructions have shed new light on the extent of the damage sustained by the Titanic during its collision with the iceberg and subsequent sinking. The images reveal the massive gash in the ship's hull, the twisted and mangled remains of the stern section, and the countless artifacts and personal belongings strewn across the seabed. In addition to providing a more detailed understanding of the physical wreckage, these advanced mapping technologies,
even the eyewitnesses of the sinking of Titanic, had many different perceptions of how that sinking took place.
Have also allowed researchers to create virtual fly-throughs of the Titanic's interior, offering a haunting glimpse into the once opulent staterooms, lounges, and corridors that now lie in silent ruin. These virtual tours, crafted through sonar data, 3D modeling, and archival photographs, transport viewers into the haunting reality of the ocean depths. As digital explorers traverse the ship's skeletal remains, each corroded corridor and ghostly chamber pulses with untold stories. The immersive experience bridges time itself, bringing to life the echoes of that fateful night and deepening our connection to this enduring maritime tragedy, where technology now illuminates the shadows of history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.